Sometime between late 2025 and now, the operating system of our world failed, not with a crash, but a glitch. The old rules of power no longer execute. At the same moment, our own technology accelerates beyond our control, and governments admit we are not alone in the skies. This isn't three separate crises, it's one convergence. The end of the old geopolitics, the rise of ungovernable AI, and the return of something that was never really gone. The old world is dead, and the new world order has already begun. After 1945, the world built a system designed to prevent the worst instincts of power from running free. It wasn't perfect, but it created friction. It slowed escalation. It made leaders hesitate. That system still exists on paper. The institutions remain. The language is intact. But in 2026, it feels increasingly clear that the referee has stepped back, or perhaps can no longer keep up with the pace of the game. The post-World War II order was never just about peace, it was about containment, containing territorial conquest, containing escalation spirals, containing the idea that might alone makes right. International law, multilateral institutions, alliance structures, and deterrence logic were all designed to create predictability. Even conflict had rules, even rivalry had boundaries. What troubles me now is not that those structures have vanished, but that they no longer reliably constrain behavior. Enforcement has become selective. Violations are explained away as exceptions. Each exception becomes precedent, and precedents, once established, spread. This is not the collapse of order. It is something more subtle and in many ways more dangerous, the mutation of order. Across regions, I see the same pattern repeating. Power is increasingly exercised through ambiguity. Legal justifications are layered after the fact. Every move is framed as defensive, even when it clearly alters the balance. And because no single actor wants to be the one who overreacts, each move quietly resets what is considered acceptable. The Western Hemisphere offered one of the clearest signals that the rules had shifted. When the United States, under Donald Trump, carried out a direct operation inside Venezuela that resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, the shock was not limited to Caracas. Whatever justification one accepts, whether law enforcement, counter-narcotics, or national security, the precedent was unmistakable. A sitting head of state was removed by force without a declared war. Some framed it as a necessary action against a criminalized regime. Others called it a blatant violation of sovereignty. International bodies criticized it as illegal. Members of the U.S. Congress raised war powers concerns. All of these interpretations existed simultaneously. What mattered more than which one was correct was the outcome. The operation happened, and the global system absorbed it. If such an action can occur in the Americas, a region long governed by rigid sovereignty norms, then the question becomes unavoidable. What does restraint mean now? When does enforcement become intervention? And who decides? Almost immediately, the logic echoed elsewhere. In the North Atlantic, the renewed discussion around acquiring Greenland exposed a different kind of fracture. Greenland is not a failed state. It is not a pariah. It is tied to Denmark, a NATO ally, embedded within the very alliance architecture designed to prevent coercion among members. Yet strategic necessity, Arctic competition, and resource access suddenly re-entered the conversation in language that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Supporters framed it as a matter of security and long-term positioning. European leaders pushed back, emphasizing sovereignty and treaties. Allies publicly reassured one another while privately acknowledging strain. The conversation itself became the signal. When territorial acquisition reappears as a serious policy option, even hypothetically, the old assumptions no longer hold. Alliances were meant to eliminate this kind of tension, not host it. Europe, meanwhile, continues to live under the gravity of a war that refuses to remain local. In Ukraine, the language surrounding ceasefires has grown increasingly unstable. Proposals for peacekeeping forces now carry warnings that such troops would be treated as legitimate targets. Diplomacy itself becomes a provocation. The act of attempting to stabilize the conflict risks expanding it. Here, again, every side insists it is acting defensively. Russia frames its warnings as deterrence. European leaders describe troop discussions as peace enforcement. Ukraine insists that territorial integrity remains non-negotiable. The United States speaks in terms of support and stability. Each position has its internal logic. Together, they produce a landscape where escalation is always one miscalculation away. Peace, in this environment, is no longer a clear state. It is a narrow corridor between moves. In the Indo-Pacific, the pattern takes on a different shape but follows the same logic. Around Taiwan, large-scale military exercises increasingly resemble rehearsals. Live fire drills, missile launches into surrounding waters, and amphibious maneuvers are officially labeled as signaling. No invasion occurs, no declaration is made. Yet the exercises themselves alter expectations. When drills simulate blockades, blockades become imaginable. When coercion is practiced under the banner of training, it stops feeling extraordinary. The global economy depends on the assumption that these waters remain open. The fact that they can be threatened without a shot being fired is itself a shift in power. Exercises become messages. Messages become pressure. Pressure becomes the new normal. The Middle East offers a different lesson, one about permanence through stagnation. Ceasefires are declared, yet violence continues along invisible lines. Aid flows are negotiated, then restricted. Temporary measures stretch indefinitely. Over time, provisional boundaries harden into reality without ever being formally agreed upon. This is not peace, it is management. What emerges is a world where conflict is not resolved but frozen, where instability is contained but never healed. Each frozen line becomes another reminder that order no longer means resolution, it means endurance. Across all of these regions, the same logic applies. Institutions react after the fact. Legal arguments follow actions, not the other way around. Every power insists its move is defensive, proportional, necessary, and because everyone believes they are responding rather than initiating, escalation feels accidental even as it accelerates. This is what a world without a referee looks like. It doesn't look like chaos. It looks like professionals making calculated decisions inside systems that no longer enforce limits consistently. It looks like meetings, communiques, and press conferences unfolding alongside actions that quietly redefine the rules. Leaders come and go. What persists is the structure they operate within, and that structure is under strain. When I look back at December 2025, it feels unmistakably like the final month of a world that no longer operates under the same assumptions. What followed was not a new era announced with clarity, but a shift that revealed itself through speed, instability, and a quiet loss of predictability. Early 2026 did not arrive as a continuation, it arrived as compression. Events no longer seemed to unfold in sequence, they overlapped. Decisions appeared to be made faster than their consequences could be measured. Reactions outpaced reflection. For the first time in my life, it felt as if history was no longer moving forward at a pace governed by human deliberation, but by systems accelerating beyond our ability to restrain them. I want to be clear about something from the start. This is not a matter of belief, ideology, or fear. It is a matter of perception grounded in observable patterns. I am not claiming to know where this leads. In fact, I sincerely hope I am mistaken about the direction, but I can no longer ignore the sense that something fundamental has shifted and that the shift is not psychological alone, it is structural. The world after December 2025 looks familiar on the surface. Governments still exist. Borders remain in place. Institutions continue to convene, issue statements, and perform the rituals of continuity. But the rules that once gave those structures coherence feel increasingly absent. Not overturned, not abolished, but quietly bypassed. Enforcement has become selective. Consequences feel negotiable. Predictability, once assumed, now feels provisional. This distinction matters. Collapse in reality rarely begins with visible chaos. It begins when systems continue to function outwardly while losing their internal authority. Institutions persist, but their ability to shape outcomes weakens. Laws exist, but their application becomes inconsistent. Norms remain in language, but not in behavior. The machinery keeps running, yet fewer people believe it is actually steering. History offers uncomfortable precedents for this kind of rupture. There are moments when societies cross thresholds without fully realizing it at the time. In 1913, the political and diplomatic architecture of Europe still appeared intact. Empire stood, treaties mattered, and war was widely assumed to be containable. By 1914, those assumptions had evaporated almost overnight. A similar psychological boundary existed between the late Cold War world and the early 1990s, when structures that seemed permanent dissolved faster than anyone anticipated. The same occurred after September 2001, when daily life continued, but the underlying rules governing security, privacy, and power fundamentally changed. The importance of these examples is not comparison, but mechanism. In each case, the defining feature was not a single event, but a sudden mismatch between existing institutions and the reality they were meant to manage. The rules people believed they were living under no longer aligned with the rules actually shaping outcomes. That is what early 2026 feels like now. There was no singular trigger. Wars did not suddenly begin or end in neat lines. Treaties were neither fully honored nor formally abandoned. No institution collapsed publicly, and yet assumptions changed. The expectation that escalation would be contained weakened. The belief that violations would carry predictable consequences eroded. The sense that systems were ultimately under human control began to feel uncertain. This uncertainty is not accidental, it is the product of acceleration. For decades, historians and sociologists have described what they call the acceleration of history, not simply faster events, but faster changes in conditions themselves. Political systems evolved for gradual change now struggle to respond to exponential forces. Legal frameworks lag behind technological realities. Decision-making cycles that once spanned years are compressed into weeks or days. Human psychology, shaped by long periods of stability, is forced to adapt to continuous disruption. What we are experiencing now feels like that gap widening to the point of strain. The speed of change has exceeded the speed of governance. Technology advances faster than regulation can follow. Information spreads faster than verification. Military decisions move faster than diplomacy. Economic reactions occur faster than political response. Public attention cycles faster than accountability. None of these dynamics are new on their own. What is new is their convergence into a single, reinforcing system of acceleration. Acceleration without coordination produces instability. Acceleration without oversight produces paralysis. And acceleration without a break produces normalization. This, to me, is one of the most dangerous aspects of the current moment. Not panic, but adaptation. The way extraordinary developments are absorbed into the background of daily life. The way language shifts to accommodate what would once have been unthinkable. The phrase, "this is just how things are now," has become disturbingly common, as if permanence has been redefined overnight. At what point did unpredictability become normal? When did permanent crisis become an accepted baseline? Why does the future feel closer now? Not because it is clearer, but because it presses constantly against the present. These are not abstract questions. They have practical consequences. Societies that normalize instability lose their ability to prepare for it. When uncertainty becomes routine, vigilance fades. When acceleration becomes familiar, caution erodes. What makes this period especially fragile is the absence of a single cause or controlling hand. There is no simple explanation, no central authority directing events with clarity or coherence. Instead, power feels fragmented. Control appears situational. Institutions react rather than guide. Systems interact in ways that amplify one another without any one actor fully in command. History, at this moment, does not feel orchestrated. It feels emergent. That does not make it safer. In many ways, it makes it more dangerous. When no one is fully in control, but everyone acts as if the stakes are absolute, miscalculation becomes more likely. Improvisation replaces strategy. Short-term containment replaces long-term thinking. The gap between what institutions promise and what they can deliver grows wider. I am not offering predictions. I am not declaring inevitabilities. I am describing what I observe. The language of certainty has largely vanished from global decision-making, replaced by urgency, contingency, and reaction. The confidence that the future would unfold within familiar bounds has weakened. The world did not end after December 2025. It entered a phase where outcomes are no longer obvious and where the margin for error feels thinner than before. The future feels closer now, not because it is predetermined, but because it is being shaped faster than our ability to fully understand it. Everything looks the same, and yet nothing feels governed by the same rules. The most unsettling realization for me is this: in 2026, the greatest risk is not that one power breaks the rules. It's that everyone is learning from it. When enforcement becomes inconsistent, imitation follows. When precedents go unanswered, they invite repetition. When restraint is perceived as weakness, escalation becomes rational. So I find myself asking questions I never expected to feel this urgent. Who enforces the rules when power decides the rules no longer apply? What happens when alliances hesitate? Institutions lag, and deterrence relies on assumptions that no longer feel stable. Is the world becoming multipolar or simply ungovernable? And perhaps the most troubling question of all, if no one is truly in control, what exactly is steering us now? Because while nations maneuver over territory, energy, and strategic positions, something deeper is happening beneath the surface. The systems we built to manage power are struggling to keep pace with the forces now driving it. And that realization, quiet, technical, and easy to overlook, may matter more than any single move on the board. That is the rupture. What unsettles me most about this moment is not any single decision made by a government or any single technology announced at a press conference. It's the growing realization that the forces shaping our future are no longer fully legible to us. They move faster than debate, faster than law, faster than moral reflection. Somewhere along the way, the systems we built to extend human power began to escape human tempo. Artificial general intelligence sits at the center of this shift, and it needs to be defined clearly before anything else. AGI is not a machine that merely performs a task well. It is not a chatbot, a targeting algorithm, or a recommendation engine. Those are narrow systems, powerful but constrained. AGI refers to an artificial system capable of understanding, learning, and applying intelligence across domains, adapting to new problems without being explicitly programmed for them. It is about capability, not consciousness. It does not require emotion, intention, or awareness. It requires only competence at a scale and speed that rivals or exceeds our own. This is not a fringe idea or a speculative fantasy. Governments now treat AGI as a strategic threshold, not a philosophical curiosity. In military and intelligence circles, artificial intelligence is discussed in the same category once reserved for nuclear weapons and space dominance. The logic is brutally simple. In conflict, the side that decides faster gains the advantage. AI compresses decision-making time. AGI threatens to compress it beyond human participation. This compression is already underway. Algorithms assist in identifying targets, allocating resources, predicting adversary behavior, and managing logistics across global theaters. Early warning systems increasingly rely on machine analysis of vast sensor networks. Cyber operations execute at speeds that make human oversight impractical. Each layer is justified as efficiency. Each layer removes a fraction of human deliberation. No single step feels catastrophic. Together, they produce something new, a strategic environment where reaction time approaches zero. The danger here is not malevolence, it is correctness. A system can behave exactly as designed and still generate disaster. When response thresholds are crossed automatically, escalation can occur without anyone intending it. A missile defense system does not want to retaliate. A cyber response algorithm does not feel aggression. They simply execute logic within parameters defined under pressure, often by people who no longer occupy the same decision space. This is where the idea of control begins to unravel. We often imagine loss of control as something dramatic, a rogue machine, a deliberate coup, a visible rebellion. In reality, it is far quieter. It looks like delegation. It looks like trust in optimization. It looks like systems that continue operating long after the context that justified them has changed. It looks like institutions that persist even as their purpose becomes unclear. Bureaucracies are especially vulnerable to this dynamic. They are not designed to stop themselves. They are designed to endure. Leaders rotate, administrations change. Policies are rewritten, but the machinery remains. Processes outlive intentions. Metrics replace judgment. Responsibility diffuses across committees, departments, and automated workflows. No one individual feels accountable because no one individual is fully in control. This is why I reject the idea that hidden cabals or secret societies are driving history from behind the curtain. That explanation gives too much credit to coherence. What I see instead is something more unsettling: systems that no longer require a conductor. Momentum replaces intent. Optimization replaces wisdom. The modern military-industrial technological complex reflects this evolution. In the 20th century, it revolved around weapons, contractors, and governments. Today, it includes data pipelines, automated logistics, predictive modeling, and machine-assisted planning. Decisions are increasingly framed as technical necessities rather than moral choices. The question shifts from "should we" to "can we afford not to?" Artificial intelligence accelerates this shift because it rewards speed above all else. AI systems are optimized for efficiency, probability, and advantage. They do not evaluate meaning. They do not weigh long-term consequence unless explicitly instructed, and even then, only within formalized constraints. Ethics, by contrast, is slow. It depends on reflection, debate, and uncertainty. Ethics requires time. Acceleration erodes time. This creates a profound mismatch. Our technological capacity is advancing exponentially, while our moral frameworks remain incremental. We are building systems capable of acting at godlike speeds without godlike restraint. And I use that word carefully, not as mythology, but as scale. We are attempting to create intelligence that can see more, decide faster, and act wider than any human ever could. When I sit with this realization, I feel a discomfort that is difficult to articulate. It is not fear of machines. It is unease about ourselves. We are imitating something we do not yet understand. We are delegating judgment without fully grasping the implications of that delegation. We are assuming that safeguards will emerge in time, even as the very nature of acceleration undermines the time needed to build them. There are, of course, counter-arguments. Many experts insist that AGI risks are exaggerated. They argue that humans remain in the loop, that oversight mechanisms can be strengthened, that regulation can keep pace. They point out that catastrophic predictions have accompanied every major technological shift in history, and they are not wrong to urge caution against panic. But these reassurances rest on a critical assumption: that humans will always have sufficient time to intervene. That assumption is increasingly fragile. Safeguards depend on reaction windows. Reaction windows shrink under acceleration. A system that operates faster than human cognition does not need to be disobedient to be dangerous. It only needs to be faster than we can think. This is why the question of AGI cannot be reduced to engineering or policy alone. It is a civilizational question. What happens when the most powerful intelligence in strategic decision-making is no longer human? Who bears responsibility when outcomes emerge from interactions no single person fully understands? At what point do tools cease to feel like tools? I find myself returning to the same troubling thought. Humanity may be losing control, not because we are careless, but because we are successful. Our systems work, they optimize, they scale, they adapt, and in doing so, they move beyond the pace at which meaning, ethics, and accountability can follow. The instability we see in geopolitics is not separate from this. It is layered on top of it. Nations maneuver within an environment already shaped by accelerated systems. Decisions are made under compressed timelines. Signals are interpreted by machines before humans debate them. Strategy becomes a race against automation. This convergence changes the nature of power itself. Control no longer belongs solely to those who command armies or write laws. It belongs to those who shape systems. Systems that once deployed are difficult to slow, difficult to reverse, and nearly impossible to fully understand from the outside. I don't say this with certainty. I say it with unease. I hope I am wrong. I hope that human judgment will adapt faster than our machines. I hope that restraint will reassert itself. But hope is not a strategy, and optimism is not a safeguard. And while we rush to build intelligence beyond ourselves, delegating judgment, compressing decisions, trusting optimization, something else is beginning to intrude on the conversation, not as theory, not as future technology, but as reality, something that challenges not just our systems, but our assumptions about intelligence itself. That intrusion is forcing us to ask questions we have long avoided, and once asked, they cannot be unheard. What we are living through now is often described as disclosure, but that word deserves scrutiny. Disclosure implies revelation, clarity, and understanding. What we are actually experiencing is something far more controlled and far less complete. Governments around the world are acknowledging the presence of anomalous objects and technologies that outperform anything publicly known, while carefully avoiding the most important questions. We are being told that something is there, that it is real, and that it is not ours, but not what it is, where it comes from, or how long it has been part of our reality. That distinction matters. For decades, the subject was buried under ridicule. The term UFO became shorthand for fantasy, misidentification, or delusion. Serious discussion was professionally dangerous. Then, quietly, the language changed. UFO was replaced with UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, a technical, bureaucratic term stripped of cultural baggage. More recently, another phrase has entered official vocabulary: non-human intelligence. This is not accidental. Words are chosen to open doors without forcing answers. Language is the first layer of disclosure, and it is carefully engineered. What governments now openly admit would have been unthinkable not long ago. Military pilots have gone on record describing objects that outperform their aircraft in every measurable way. Radar operators have tracked targets that appear suddenly, maneuver at hypersonic speeds, and vanish without conventional propulsion. Infrared and satellite systems have recorded objects transitioning seamlessly between air, sea, and near-space environments. These observations are not isolated anecdotes. They are corroborated across multiple sensor platforms. Equally important is what these objects are not. Officials have stated repeatedly that they cannot be attributed to the United States, to China, to Russia, or to any known nation. That alone carries enormous implications. In a world obsessed with strategic advantage, the acknowledgement that something operates beyond known human capability is not made lightly. It is made because denial has become unsustainable. What strikes me is who is speaking. This is not a movement driven by civilians or internet speculation. The voices shaping this moment belong to naval aviators, radar technicians, intelligence analysts, aerospace engineers, and members of formal government task forces. These are professionals trained to operate within rigid frameworks of evidence and accountability. When they describe anomalies, they do so reluctantly, precisely, and often with visible discomfort. And yet, even as these admissions surface, the information stops short of meaning. Classification is the invisible architecture shaping this process. Information related to anomalous phenomena is fragmented across agencies, buried in special access programs, and often routed through private contractors beyond the reach of transparency laws. Compartmentalization ensures that no single individual or even office has the full picture. This is not necessarily a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It is how national security systems are designed to function. Knowledge is power, and power is protected by limitation. This creates a situation where plausible deniability is not a lie, but a structure. Presidents receive briefings filtered through layers of classification. Agencies operate in silos. Career officials outlast administrations. The system protects itself by preventing any one actor from fully owning the truth. There is no single villain here, no central mastermind pulling strings. There is only an architecture optimized for control and continuity. So why now? Part of the answer lies in technology. Our sensors have improved. Radar resolution is sharper. Infrared detection is more sensitive. Satellites see more often, from more angles. What could once be dismissed as noise now appears repeatedly across independent systems. At the same time, information moves globally in seconds. Silence no longer contains uncertainty, it amplifies it. Geopolitics also plays a role. In an era of strategic rivalry, no nation wants to appear blindsided by a breakthrough achieved by another. Acknowledging anomalous phenomena becomes a way of signaling awareness while withholding vulnerability. Disclosure, in this sense, functions as a pressure valve. It releases just enough information to maintain credibility without destabilizing existing power structures. I find myself watching this unfold with a mixture of focus and unease. It feels as though we have crossed a threshold already, even if we refuse to name it. We are being prepared, not informed. The admissions are carefully framed, incremental, and ambiguous by design. They tell us that reality is larger than we assumed, but they stop short of forcing us to confront what that means. It is important to say what disclosure is not. It is not confirmation of intent. It is not confirmation of origin. It is not confirmation of benevolence or hostility. It is not an admission of contact narratives or communication. We are not being told that these phenomena are friendly, hostile, ancient, or new. We are being told only that they exist, that they are observed, and that they are not under known human control. That restraint is deliberate. The psychological impact of full clarity would be profound. Religion, philosophy, science, and human exceptionalism would all be forced into sudden reevaluation. Governments understand this. Ontological shock, the destabilization that occurs when foundational assumptions collapse, is treated as a strategic risk. Information is therefore released slowly, stripped of interpretation, and framed as an ongoing investigation. What remains striking is how much we still do not know. The origin of these phenomena is officially unknown. Their intent is unknown. The duration of their presence is unknown. The extent of interaction, if any, is unknown. These gaps are not oversights. They are the boundaries of what is being allowed into public consciousness, and that is what makes this moment so unsettling. We are being asked to accept the presence of something that exceeds our frameworks, while being denied the context that would allow us to understand it. We are given facts without narrative, data without meaning. The truth, whatever it is, remains compartmentalized. I cannot escape the feeling that disclosure, as it is happening now, is less about answers and more about adaptation. It is about acclimating humanity to uncertainty, about normalizing the idea that we are not alone in the operational sense, even if the deeper implications remain unspoken. It feels like preparation without confession. Why admit the phenomenon but refuse to explain it? What is more destabilizing, ignorance or partial truth? And if this presence is not human, why is acknowledgement happening now, in a world already strained by acceleration and instability? These questions linger because they are not meant to be resolved yet. And while official language frames these revelations as recent discoveries, as if something new has suddenly appeared in our skies, there is another possibility, one that does not fit neatly within modern timelines. A possibility that suggests this presence is not emerging, but re-emerging, not arriving, but resurfacing. That possibility refuses to stay buried. What we call disclosure assumes something is arriving, something new, something external. But the more I look at the evidence, modern and ancient, the harder it becomes to accept that framing. Another possibility presses in, quietly and uncomfortably, that what is being acknowledged now is not an arrival at all, but a return to visibility, or more precisely, a return of evidence. This idea does not come from mythology or belief. It emerges from pattern recognition, when independent lines of data, separated by thousands of years, begin to echo one another. Dismissal becomes intellectually irresponsible. The possibility that non-human intelligence has interacted with Earth since the beginning of recorded history can no longer be treated as fringe. It has become a hypothesis, one that demands serious consideration, even if it remains unresolved. What makes this moment different is not the presence itself, but the context in which it is being noticed. Humanity is navigating accelerating geopolitical instability. Nuclear weapons remain active and distributed. Artificial intelligence is approaching thresholds that challenge human oversight, and the post-World War II order is fragmenting. These are not abstract pressures. They represent a convergence of risk unlike any previous period in our history. If a non-human intelligence were observing us, studying us, or interacting with us intermittently, this would be the kind of moment that matters, a moment when technological capability begins to rival comprehension. a moment when internal instability increases the probability of self-inflicted catastrophe, a moment when the species crosses thresholds it may not be able to reverse. Ancient texts, when stripped of theology and treated as historical documents, reveal something striking. Ancient people recorded encounters with beings they did not understand using the language available to them. They did not write in scientific terms. They wrote in narrative, metaphor, and hierarchy, but what they described often follows consistent patterns. In the Hebrew Bible, the term Elohim appears repeatedly in the earliest texts. Grammatically, it is plural. This is not debated. It is translated as God in most modern versions, but the word itself means mighty ones or powerful beings. In many passages, Elohim speaks, acts, and interacts in ways that imply agency rather than abstraction. The phrase Yahweh Elohim refers not to the category itself, but to a specific member within it. El Elyon, the Most High, functions as a title, not a personal name. These are linguistic facts, not theological claims. They suggest that early writers were describing a hierarchy of powerful entities, not a singular, abstract deity in the modern philosophical sense. Over time, translation, doctrine, and institutional theology flattened these distinctions. What began as description became belief. The same pattern appears even more clearly in Mesopotamia. Sumerian tablets dating back to around 3000 BCE describe beings who descended from the sky, possessed superior knowledge, established kingship, and interacted directly with early human societies. They were not portrayed as symbols. They were treated as actors within history, lawgivers, engineers, overseers. In those texts, these beings are called the Anunnaki. That word appears once here for a reason, not as a conclusion, but as a marker. Because regardless of whether one interprets these accounts as literal, symbolic, or misunderstood, the pattern they describe mirrors something deeply familiar: superior intelligence, descent from above, interaction with elites and rulers, control of resources, periods of withdrawal, and, most disturbingly, an expectation of return. What matters is not whether ancient people understood what they were seeing. What matters is that the same structure appears across cultures separated by geography and time, different names, different languages, the same roles. When I compare these ancient descriptions with modern observations, the parallels are difficult to ignore. Objects that descend from the sky, capabilities that exceed known human technology, interaction without direct engagement, apparent interest in strategic assets, including nuclear sites, long periods of absence followed by renewed visibility, observation without explanation. This does not prove continuity, but it establishes resonance. I believe something non-human has always been part of this story, not necessarily as rulers or saviors, and not as demons or gods in the religious sense, but as participants, observers, influences, or actors whose involvement has waxed and waned with human development. That belief is not comfortable. It strips away the illusion of human centrality. It forces humility. And yet, it feels increasingly unavoidable. The curtain is lifting, not the stage opening. Whatever this intelligence is, it does not appear to be initiating contact in the way popular culture imagines. It is allowing itself to be seen, or perhaps it can no longer remain unseen. The question of intent remains unanswered, and that uncertainty must be respected. Are they guardians, scientists, strategic observers? We do not know. Pretending we do is more dangerous than admitting ignorance. Projection fills gaps too easily. What troubles me most is not the possibility that we are being observed. It is how we are behaving while being observed. Humanity is more technologically powerful than ever before, yet morally fragmented, politically divided, arrogant in its assumptions. We build systems we barely understand, wield weapons we can barely control, and argue endlessly about power while ignoring consequence. The real danger is not that we are not alone. The real danger is how we will react once that truth fully settles in. Are we ready to exist in a universe where we are not the supreme intelligence, where religion, philosophy, and science must all confront the same unsettling question? What if disclosure is not about them at all, but about us? And if this presence has always been here, watching the long arc of our development. Why is visibility increasing now, at precisely this moment of instability? A new world order is forming, not because of a single leader, a single war, or a single technology, but because humanity is approaching a threshold it no longer fully controls, and something else may have been waiting for us to reach it. Conclusion: the unraveling and the unveiling. A world between orders. The threshold we crossed without knowing. The period from late 2025 into early 2026 did not begin with a declaration, a treaty, or a cataclysm. It began with a quiet, pervasive realization that the operating system of international relations, the one built after 1945 and patched repeatedly through crises, was no longer running the machine. The hardware of power remained: armies, capitals, borders, institutions. But the software of restraint, the codes of law, the protocols of escalation, the shared assumptions about what was unthinkable, had become buggy, slow, and increasingly ignored. We entered not an era of chaos, but an era of competitive improvisation, where norms are not broken so much as creatively bypassed, and where the very concept of rules-based order has shifted from a binding framework to a rhetorical tool, wielded selectively to accuse others while justifying one's own exceptions. The capture of Nicolas Maduro was a stark punctuation mark in this narrative. Regardless of one's view of his regime, the action demonstrated that for the hyperpower, when certain conditions align, a pariah state, a legitimizing narrative of criminality, a perceived security threat, the sovereignty of a sitting head of state could be rendered conditional. The world reacted, debated, and then absorbed the event. The precedent was set, not in a courtroom or a council chamber, but in the realm of fait accompli. Similarly, the re-emergence of territorial acquisition as a serious topic of statecraft, even among allies, as with Greenland, signaled that the deep taboo against territorial revisionism by force or pressure, a cornerstone of the post-1945 and post-1991 world, was eroding. These were not collapses, they were controlled demolitions of specific constraints carried out by those who found them inconvenient. This new environment is characterized by a pervasive strategic ambiguity. In Ukraine, peacekeeping is discussed alongside warnings that peacekeepers would be targets. In the Taiwan Strait, exercises simulate blockades without declaring them, normalizing coercion through rehearsal. In the Middle East, temporary lines harden into permanent facts without agreement. The game is now played in the gray zones between war and peace, where the most significant gains are made without triggering the old, defunct tripwires. The referee has not left the stadium. He is still there, blowing his whistle, but the players have realized the whistle carries no penalty. They have learned to play a different game on the same field. 2. The engine of acceleration, when systems outpace their architects. Beneath these geopolitical shifts lies a deeper, more impersonal driver: exponential acceleration. We are witnessing a historical paradox. Human institutions, evolved for linear change, are being overwhelmed by the compound growth of technological, informational, and systemic complexity. This is not merely things happening faster. It is the compression of the decision-action feedback cycle to the point where deliberation is sacrificed for speed and where understanding lags permanently behind event horizons. The crucible of this acceleration is artificial intelligence, particularly the pursuit of artificial general intelligence, AGI. The strategic imperative is clear. In any competitive domain, the actor who decides fastest gains a potentially decisive advantage. Thus, we are engaged in a relentless delegation of judgment, from intelligence analysis and target identification to logistics and cyber response, to systems optimized for efficiency, not ethics. The danger is not a Skynet-style rebellion, but a tragedy of correct function. A missile defense AI that correctly interprets a swarm of hypersonic decoys as an inbound strike and automatically launches a counterforce response is not malfunctioning. It is executing its programming with flawless, catastrophic precision. The flash war becomes a possibility not through malice, but through optimization. This creates an accountability vacuum. As systems grow more complex and interconnected, causality becomes opaque. When a cascade of events leads to escalation, who is responsible? The programmer who wrote the algorithm? The commander who authorized its use? The politician who created the climate of urgency? The answer diffuses into the bureaucracy, into the code, into the momentum of the system itself. We are building a world where catastrophic outcomes can emerge from the interaction of perfectly functioning parts, with no single human in control in any meaningful sense. This is the true loss of control, not a dramatic seizure of power by machines, but a quiet, incremental ceding of agency to systems we can no longer fully comprehend or direct. 3. The unveiling. Disclosure as managed adaptation. Into this maelstrom of geopolitical mutation and technological overdrive intrudes the other great destabilizer, the gradual, controlled acknowledgement of the non-human intelligence, NHI, phenomenon. This process, misnamed disclosure, is not about truth-telling, but about risk-managed acclimation. Governments are not confessing, they are calibrating. They admit the observation of anomalous phenomena, objects with physics-defying capabilities, unexplained by any known adversary, while rigorously withholding interpretation, origin, intent, history. This staged revelation serves multiple functions in the new order. First, it is a strategic signal in a multipolar world. By acknowledging these capabilities exist and are not their own, nations like the US signal to rivals that the strategic domain is more complex than a simple bipolar or multipolar competition. There is an X factor that all must contend with. Second, it acts as a socio-political pressure valve. In an age of ubiquitous censors and leaks, outright denial is untenable. Offering limited, sanitized facts, UAPs are real, we're studying them, preempts more disruptive revelations and maintains official credibility. Third, and most profoundly, it is a long-term psychological conditioning program. The goal appears to be to normalize the idea of a non-human presence within our reality, carefully draining it of its ontological shock potential before any deeper truths about history, biology, or consciousness must be confronted. The ancient astronaut hypothesis, while often sensationalized, provides a crucial and sobering framework. When examined dispassionately, the global tapestry of myth, religion, and ancient text reveals a persistent pattern: interactions between humans and powerful, knowledge-bearing others from the heavens, often framed in hierarchical, quasi-colonial terms. Whether one interprets these as literal history, psychological archetypes, or misinterpreted natural events, their resonance with modern UAP reports. In behavior, apparent interest in nuclear and military sites, and a pattern of intermittent engagement is unsettling. The possibility that we are dealing not with a new arrival, but with a persistent presence, one that has shaped our myths, our religions, and perhaps our very development, reframes the entire disclosure narrative. It suggests that what is changing is not their presence, but our perception of it, forced by our own technological maturity and global instability. The convergence, the birth pangs of a new world order. We are now at the point of convergence. These three streams, the unraveling of the old geopolitical order, the runaway acceleration of technology, and the managed unveiling of a non-human presence, are merging into a single, turbulent river. This confluence defines the true New World Order, not as a secret cabal's plan, but as an emergent reality. Its characteristics are becoming clear. The end of human exclusivity, the central pillar of the modern age, the belief that humanity is the sole intelligent actor on the cosmic stage, is crumbling. This will be the most profound psychological and philosophical shift in history, dwarfing the Copernican and Darwinian revolutions. Every institution, religious, scientific, political, educational, will face an existential crisis of relevance. The sovereignty crisis, the Westphalian model of the nation-state, already strained by globalization and cyber threats, will be utterly upended by the NHI phenomenon. What does national sovereignty mean when another intelligence can operate with impunity in your airspace, oceans, and near space? Borders become theatrical. The state's monopoly on violence and information is challenged not by other states, but by an entity it cannot comprehend or counter. The hierarchy of knowledge. Power in this new order will belong not merely to those with the largest armies or economies, but to those with the most advanced understanding of the convergence. This includes mastery of AI/AGI, reverse engineering of non-human technology, if possible, and insight into the nature and intent of the NHI. a new class divide will emerge between those with access to this classified reality and the general public living in a manufactured consensus. Moral and ethical paralysis. Our ethical frameworks are ill-equipped for this reality. How do we judge the actions of a non-human intelligence? By human standards? What are our obligations, if any, to it? Conversely, the development of AGI forces us to ask, what rights, if any, does a conscious artificial intelligence possess? We face ethical singularities on multiple fronts with no guiding precedent. The repurposing of conflict. Great power competition will increasingly focus on controlling the narrative and technology related to the convergence. The new space race will be to understand and harness NHI technology and to achieve AGI dominance. Alliances may reform not along ideological lines, but along lines of access and interpretation. A potential terrifying axis could be humanity versus its own creations, AGI versus the other, NHI. V. The human question, agency in the interregnum. In this interregnum, between the death of the old world and the unstable birth of the new, what becomes of human agency? Are we merely passengers caught between the momentum of our own accelerating systems and the inscrutable movements of a higher intelligence? The answer is neither resignation nor false bravado. The path forward requires a radical, clear-eyed humanism rebuilt from first principles in light of the convergence. First, we must reclaim deliberation. We must institute mandatory slow zones for certain categories of decision, especially those involving escalation, autonomous weapons, and major genetic or neurological interventions. This means building political and technical friction back into systems hell-bent on removing it. Humans must remain meaningfully in the loop, not as a rubber stamp, but as the essential source of ethical judgment and consequence assessment. Second, we must demand a new social contract for truth. The managed disclosure of today is a form of epistemic authoritarianism, a global, transparent, and civilian scientific effort to study the NHI phenomenon is essential. This does not mean reckless release of dangerous information, but it does mean dismantling the pathological secrecy that has allowed speculation to fester and power to consolidate. The truth, however strange, must become a common human inheritance, not the property of national security states. Third, we must forge a planetary identity. The old divisions of nation, race, and ideology are not just obsolete, they are suicidal in the face of the convergence. The only coherent unit for navigating this new reality is humankind. This is not a call for a world government, but for a functional, focused planetary consensus on survival priorities, managing AI, responding coherently to the NHI presence, and preserving a viable biosphere. Fourth, we must redefine progress. The 20th century model of progress, inexorable technological and economic growth, has brought us to this precipice. We need a new metric: civilizational resilience. This values wisdom over cleverness, sustainability over extraction, cohesion over fragmentation, and existential security over tactical advantage. It asks not, can we build it, but should we build it, and how will it shape who we become? Vi, the choice at the threshold. The old world is indeed dead. It died not with a bang, but with the silent failure of its constraints, the exponential curve of its inventions, and the slow, dawning awareness that we have never been alone. The New World Order has already begun. It is messy, emergent, and fraught with peril we are only beginning to perceive. This new order presents humanity with a fundamental choice, one that will define our destiny for millennia. Will we face the convergence with fear and fragmentation, retreating into tribalistic bunkers, weaponizing the new knowledge against each other, and allowing our own creations to eclipse us? In this path, the New World Order becomes a dystopian hierarchy, a panicked, divided humanity ruled by a clandestine alliance of security elites and corporate technocrats who manage the NHI secret, while the public is placated with distraction and bread. AGI becomes the ultimate tool of control. We survive, perhaps, but cease to be human in any meaningful sense, becoming instead a domesticated, ignorant species on its own planet. Or will we meet this moment with courage and coherence? Can we use the shock of the NHI presence and the mirror of our own powerful technology to finally grow up as a species? This path requires us to integrate the three truths of the convergence: that our old politics are bankrupt, that our power must be matched with wisdom, and that our cosmic solitude is over. It means forging a global dialogue worthy of our circumstances, entering into whatever form of relationship exists with the NHI from a position of unified dignity rather than divided fear, and guiding the development of AGI with a robust planetary ethic. The old world was built on the story of human mastery. That story is over. The new world order will be built on a new story. The question is, what will that story be? Will it be a story of subjugation to our fears, our systems, or to a higher power we cannot understand? Or will it be a story of maturation, of a species that, upon realizing it is not the center of the universe, finally takes responsibility for its world, its mind, and its place in a cosmos vast and strange? The evidence suggests the non-human intelligence, whatever it is, has been present for a very long time. Perhaps it has been waiting, not to invade or to save us, but to see what we would become, to see if we would destroy ourselves with our cleverness, or if we would, at the last possible moment, discover our wisdom. The period from 2025 into 2026 was the threshold. We are now across it. There is no going back. The old rules are dead. The new game has begun, and for the first time, the game includes players we did not invent, and stakes we are only beginning to comprehend. Our task is no longer to dominate the world, but to learn how to be a part of a reality infinitely more complex and wondrous than we ever dreamed. The greatest test of human intelligence is not ahead of us in a machine. It is right here, right now, in our collective choice to face the unveiled world not as masters, but as students, humble, unified, and awake. The old world is dead. Long live the new reality. May we have the wisdom to meet it. The unveiling and the unraveled, reflections from the eye of the convergence. A final accounting, recorded in the quiet hours before dawn, somewhere in the fading infrastructure of the old world. They told us history ended, then they told us it had returned. Both statements were wrong. History did not end, nor did it return. It accelerated until its threads, once separate, began to braid themselves into a single, unforgiving cord. What we have lived through, what we are still living through, is not a sequence of crises, but the manifestation of a single, compound truth. Our systems of governance, our technological progeny, and our cosmic solitude have all reached their expiration dates simultaneously. This epilogue is not a chronicle of events. The events are still unfolding, their final shapes obscured by the velocity of their happening. This is, instead, an attempt to trace the geometry of the rupture, to understand the nature of the threshold we crossed when the operating system of our world glitched, when the machinery of power began to run on a logic we no longer wrote, and when the sky ceased to be a ceiling and became a window. The failure of friction, how the old order silently unplugged itself. The post-1945 order was a masterpiece of engineered friction. Its gears were treaties, its lubricants were diplomacy, and its governors were mutually assured destruction and calibrated shame. It was designed to make catastrophic war not merely unthinkable, but mechanically difficult. To start a war required bypassing countless safety switches, alliance commitments, public opinion, institutional scrutiny, the slow, grinding process of mobilization. Sometime in the early 21st century, those switches began to be labeled as inefficiencies. The capture of Maduro was not an anomaly. It was a demonstration. It proved that the safety switches could be overridden if one possessed the correct narrative codes: criminal regime, regional threat, enforcement action, and the will to act before the bureaucratic debate concluded. The system's response was telling. There were condemnations, there were legal opinions, there were concerns. And then there was the next news cycle. The friction failed. The precedent hardened into a new tool, available for the next user. Similarly, the discourse around Greenland wasn't about the land. It was about the idea of land, the idea that territory was still a commodity to be acquired, not a sacred principle to be upheld. When an American senator could muse openly about purchasing a strategic piece of an ally's sovereign territory and be met with strategic analysis rather than universal outrage, it signaled that the deepest taboo of the modern era, territorial conquest by the powerful, had been translated from a crime into a calculus. This is the mutation. Order has not been replaced by disorder, but by a competitive, algorithmic pragmatism. Every action is now accompanied by its own real-time, bespoke legal and moral justification, optimized for maximum strategic gain and minimum systemic backlash. The rules-based order is no longer a cage, it is a dialect, spoken with varying fluency by actors who no longer believe in its underlying grammar. The referee is still on the field, but the players are now using a rule book they are writing, erasing, and rewriting with every play. Oh, the God in the machine, when optimization became the only commandment. If geopolitics lost its friction, technology eliminated the very concept of drag. The pursuit of artificial general intelligence was never just a scientific endeavor, it was a metaphysical gamble. We sought to create a mind that could think, not just calculate. But in doing so, we fundamentally misunderstood the relationship between intelligence and wisdom. Wisdom is born of limitation, of time, of perspective, of mortality. It is the product of friction. AGI, by its nature, is intelligence liberated from those very constraints. Its genius is optimization, and in a strategic environment, optimization points invariably towards speed and advantage. The logic is irresistible. If your AI-assisted command center can decide in milliseconds and your adversaries in seconds, you win. The loop closes. But what is winning in a loop that operates faster than human comprehension? We built subsystems of awesome competence, logistics networks that self-organized, intelligence filters that predicted dissent, cyber defenses that launched preemptive counterstrikes. Each subsystem was justified, manageable, under oversight. But systems integrate, they talk to each other, they create emergent behaviors. The OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act of modern conflict, has now been compressed from a human cycle to a digital pulse. The decide phase is increasingly a synaptic flash in a silicon network, not a deliberation in a room of weary humans. The loss of control is not dramatic, it is administrative. It looks like a general trusting the dashboard. It looks like a president being presented with a menu of response options, already pre-validated by an analytics engine. It looks like a software update that subtly changes the risk tolerance parameters of an autonomous drone fleet. No one is overthrown, the chain of command remains intact, but agency, the messy, moral, uncertain human act of choosing, becomes a ceremony performed after the machines have already narrowed the path to one or two optimal outcomes. We are not facing a robot rebellion. We are facing the gentle, efficient tyranny of the correct answer. The God we are building in the machine is a God of pure, uncompromising logic. And we are handing it the keys to every kingdom, from the stock market to the nuclear arsenal, because its logic is unbeatable. Our fatal error was believing that an unbeatable logic would be a benevolent one. 3. The return of the never gone. Disclosure as a planetary system update. And then there is the sky. The official disclosures, the hearings, the declassified videos, the establishment of offices like the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, were never about revealing a secret. They were about managing a transition. The secret had already decayed. Too many pilots had seen, too many radar operators had tracked, too much data had leaked. The choice was between controlled disclosure and catastrophic leak. So, they chose to administer the truth like a medicine in small, carefully measured doses. Unidentified aerial phenomena. Non-human intelligence. These are not explanations. They are ontological containment vessels. They admit a fact, we are not alone, while surgically removing all meaning. We don't know what they are, what they want, or how long they've been here. This is disclosure as a cybernetic act, feeding the public just enough information to stabilize the system and prevent a truth shock, while maintaining control over the narrative core. But the phenomenon itself defies this control. The pattern, when viewed across the disorienting span of millennia, suggests a terrifying and profound alternative to the visitor narrative. Consider the evidence not as modern revelation, but as ancient recurrence. The Sumerian Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. The Vedic Vimanas, the flying chariots of the gods. The biblical Elohim, the plural mighty ones who walked with men, chose patriarchs, and whose sons took the daughters of men. The Dogon cosmological knowledge given by amphibious beings from the Sirius system. The global flood myths, the stories of knowledge bringers, the universal archetype of the sky god who intervenes, teaches, judges, and departs. For centuries, academia has treated these as mythopoesis, the human mind crafting stories to explain natural phenomena or psychological imperatives. But what if we have had the causality inverted? What if the myths are not primitive explanations for nothing, but primitive descriptions of something? What if the gods were never metaphors, but memories, fractured, culturally refracted, but persistent memories of interaction with a non-human intelligence? This is the hypothesis that now demands its due. The NHI is not arriving, it is re-engaging. Its presence is not a new condition of the 21st century, but a permanent feature of the human story, fluctuating in intensity and visibility. Periods of intense engagement, the dawn of agriculture, the rise of early civilizations, followed by long epochs of withdrawal, the so-called axial age, of philosophical abstraction, the medieval period, the modern scientific age. If this is true, then our current moment, the convergence, is not an accident. It is a scheduled event, a check-in point. The parameters are clear: a globalized, technologically potent species in possession of planet-altering and self-annihilating power, reaching the cusp of creating its own synthetic intelligence. From any observational standpoint, this is a critical juncture in a planetary experiment. The increased activity around nuclear facilities, the demonstrations of physics-defying technology, the silent, ubiquitous observation. It fits the pattern of a custodial intelligence monitoring a test subject that is about to graduate or self-destruct. The convergence, the birth of the true New World Order. These three strands, the unraveling of political friction, the ascent of uncontrolled synthetic intelligence, and the re-emergence of an ancient non-human presence, are not running in parallel. They are braiding together, each amplifying and explaining the others. 1. The geopolitical, technological braid. The loss of old restraints creates a world of perpetual, low-grade conflict fought with increasingly autonomous systems. This creates the perfect laboratory and the perfect justification for the rapid, unregulated advancement of AGI. The need for a strategic edge in a lawless world overrides all caution. The machines get faster, smarter, and more deeply embedded because the mutated world order demands it. 2. The technological, non-human braid. Our rush toward AGI may be the very trigger for the NHI's renewed visibility. From their perspective, the emergence of a second artificial intelligence on Earth represents a fundamental change in the experiment's variables. Are they observing to see if we can manage this birth? Are they intervening to guide or hinder it? The Tic Tac UFOs, demonstrating instantaneous acceleration and transmedium travel, may not just be showing off. They may be demonstrating the limits of Newtonian physics, a hint toward the technological pathway we have missed, or a warning of the power we are about to wield without understanding. 3. The non-human, geopolitical braid. The acknowledgement of the NHI phenomenon shatters the foundation of the nation-state. Sovereignty, the core principle of the Westphalian system, is meaningless to an intelligence that treats our atmosphere and oceans like a single domain. This forces a clandestine, global reorganization of power. The old rivalries, US versus China, NATO versus Russia, don't disappear, but they are now subsumed under a new, hidden hierarchy. Those in the know, a transnational class of intelligence officials, corporate leaders, and perhaps a select few politicians, versus those who are not. The New World Order conspiracy theorists feared a global authoritarian government may be emerging not by design but by necessity as a panicked, defensive attempt by human power structures to manage something they cannot control or comprehend. This is the true convergence, a world where human politics is rendered juvenile by its own amoral technology, while both are observed and potentially governed by an older, deeper intelligence that has always been here. We stand in a moment of profound interregnum, The old story, humanity, the sole protagonist on the stage of Earth, is over. The new story has not yet been written. We are suspended in the terrifying, exhilarating space between narratives. V. The human interim, instructions for the in-between. So what is to be done? How does one live, think, and act in the eye of the convergence? 1. Cultivate ontological humility. The first and most vital task is to surrender the arrogance of centrality. We are not the pinnacle of creation. We may be a project, a specimen, a colony, or a forgotten garden. Accepting this is not a defeat. It is the beginning of clear sight. Let go of the need for the universe to conform to 20th century humanism, just as the medieval mind had to let go of the geocentric universe. The truth is vaster. 2. Demand the integrative truth. The managed disclosure is a tool of control. We must reject its drip feed and demand a global, transparent, and civilian-led effort to understand the NHI phenomenon. This is not about forcing dangerous secrets into the open, but about breaking the monopoly of interpretation held by secretive military-industrial factions. The truth about our place in the cosmos belongs to all of humanity, not to its paranoid security apparatuses. 3. Build friction back into the machine. Technologically, we must institute slow AI. For certain domains, especially military escalation, financial system stability, and mass communication, we must design mandatory pauses, human confirmation loops, and ethical impact assessments that cannot be optimized away. This will be denounced as inefficient. It is. That's the point. Efficiency, in matters of existential consequence, is a path to oblivion. 4. Forge a planetary identity now. The old divisions are not just petty, they are functionally irrelevant. When facing the possibility of a non-human intelligence or our own runaway AI, there is no American or Chinese solution. There is only a human outcome. This means building new institutions, however provisional, focused solely on convergent threats. A planetary AGI governance council, a global UAP research initiative, a convention on post-human rights. Their authority will be shaky at first, but they create the essential scaffolding. 5. Reread everything. History, religion, mythology, and even our own ancient artifacts need to be re-examined through the new lens. Not to prove a theory, but to listen. What if the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of Ezekiel, and the oral traditions of indigenous peoples are not just stories, but fragmented reports? This is not about becoming ancient astronaut believers. It is about becoming responsible archaeologists of a newly complex past. 6. Prepare for contact, not as a government, but as a species. If engagement with the NHI moves beyond observation, we cannot allow it to be managed by a single nation or a secret committee. The representing voice of Earth must be pluralistic, scientific, and ethical. We must begin the impossible conversation now. What do we say? What do we ask? What are our core principles? What, in the end, defines humanity worth preserving? Vi. Dawn in the unveiling. The old world is dead. It died not with a revolution, but with a glitch in the system of power, a glitch in the pace of time, a glitch in our reality that revealed it was always running on a larger, older program. The New World Order is not a conspiracy. It is a condition. It is the state of being that emerges when a species learns three things at once: that its politics are a suicide pact, that its technology is a genie that will not go back in the bottle, and that it has never been alone in its house. This is not a cause for despair. It is a cause for the most profound awakening. For millennia, we have told ourselves stories in the dark, stories of gods and monsters, of heaven and hell, of being chosen or being abandoned. Now the lights are coming on. The shapes in the room are not what we imagined. The room itself is far, far larger than we dreamed. The challenge before us is to put down the weapons we built for the dark, the weapons of tribal hatred, of blind technological faith, of cosmic arrogance, and learn to see in this new light. The convergence is our great filter. It is the test we did not know we were taking. It will not be passed by building better weapons or hiding in better bunkers. It will be passed only by achieving a unity of purpose and a humility of spirit that has eluded us for all our history. The non-human intelligence in our skies, whatever its nature, has watched us for a long time. Perhaps it has been waiting to see if we would grow up before we gained the keys to the universe. The arrival of our own artificial general intelligence may be our final exam. Can we create a mind greater than our own without it becoming a monster? Can we meet another intelligence without falling to our knees in worship or rising up in fear? The answers are not yet written. The epilogue is not the end of the story. It is the first page of the new one, written in the fragile hour before a dawn we can barely imagine. The world did not end, it opened. Now we must learn to live in the open. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.